Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. This is a roundtable discussion on, as you can see here, Asian and Asian American faculty in LSA, a glass ceiling, ? My name is Amy Stillman. I am the director of the Ethnic Studies program in Asian and Pacific Islander American Studies here at U of M within the Department of American Culture, and I'll be the moderator today. So there are refreshments in the back of the room. Please feel free to get up and help yourself throughout. And let's get going, get this show on the road, as they say. To begin with, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce Dean Andrew Martin, from the Dean of the College of Literature, Sciences, and the Arts, who will deliver some brief welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Amy, and not only for working with your colleagues for organizing this event, but for the introduction. I'm really pleased to welcome all of you to the Asian and Asian American faculty in LSA, a glass ceiling ? Panel. This is a very timely event that aligns with other LSA initiatives emerging out of the President's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Planning Initiative that we've been working on as a community during this academic year. As the largest college in the university, LSA celebrates its role in Michigan's deeply rooted commitment to diversity. We at the college take pride in the fact that LSA welcomed the first woman, the first Asian student, and the first African American woman to the University of Michigan in the 1870s. Quite simply, diversity is essential for one of the world's leading universities to produce ideas and graduates that will make an impact in today's increasingly connected global community. To quote President Schlissel, "We believe that diversity is essential to individual flourishing, educational excellence, and the advancement of knowledge." Today's roundtable event brings us together to hear and learn from our valued community of Asian and Asian American faculty. I am extraordinarily proud to be at an institution that can have this type of discussion today on this incredibly important topic. I hope you all will join me in looking forward to the comments and to the productive discussion. And to the panelists, thank you all for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Martin. Okay. As moderator and organizer for this panel, I would first, of course, like to acknowledge the support we had in organizing this event. We had very generous contributions from Dean Martin's office and also from Vice Provost Rob Seller's office, so we're very appreciative of that. And of course, the program in the Asian Pacific Islander American Studies is also a third co-sponsor and primary organizer of this. And it's been a pleasure to work with all of my colleagues in pulling this together rather quickly. I am going to begin by delivering some framing remarks about the problematic nature of the terms Asian and Asian American and why they have produced such challenges for us when we talk about issues and affairs having to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I always start by defining Asian and Asian American in terms of the Census Bureau's definitions, and in the latest census and the census briefs from 2013, this definition is set out in terms of home countries, and I've outlined three major areas: the Far East, Southeast Asia, and the Indian subcontinent as homelands, ancestral homelands, or recent emigration homelands of people who are counted as Asian and Asian American in the U.S. Census. This breakdown comes from a research report put out by the Pew Research Center in 2013 about the state of Asian America And the report was controversially accepted when it was released because it painted overall a very positive picture of high achievement levels, high socioeconomic attainment and statuses among the Asian American demographic sector in the United States that simply does not stand up once we begin looking at the data very closely. Here we see a representation of the largest 7 communities within this Asian American spectrum. And here is a breakdown of population, relative population dispersed throughout the United States. So you can see the Asian American population in the state of Michigan is not among the more populated areas, but we're not among the least populated for Asian American population within the state. Now, the term Asian American, as Director of Asian American Studies here, it always behooves me to begin by acknowledging that that term itself, Asian American, is an invention. It was invented, and we have a birth moment, 1968. It was invented by student activists who were part of the Third World Liberation Front movement activities in San Francisco, especially by students connected with San Francisco State University and the University of California, Berkeley. Their activism, they were acting in concert with ethnic consciousness movements among all student of color communities at the time. And the invention of Asian American was a means for bringing together student communities that had identified separately as Filipino American or Japanese American or Chinese American, but and in the strategic mode that there's powers in numbers and there's power in coalition. And the fields of ethnic studies were one of the major accomplishments of the student activism movements. And so Asian American studies is one of several ethnic studies fields that emerged at that time. And this is a field of teaching and scholarship that focuses on Asian Americans and attempts to address the absence of Asian Americans in U.S. history, U.S. literature, U.S. culture, U.S. life, U.S. political thought, and so forth, so on and so forth. Asian American studies, one of the things that Asian American studies has established was that despite this incredible diversity, ethnic diversity within this Asian American rubric, there are uncannily shared experiences of these communities in the United States, in United States history. And they all coalesce around these bullet points here of racially based exclusion from US society, discrimination, the enduring anti-Asian violence that continues to this day, and having to endure the persistence of stereotypes, and I've listed several of the major stereotypes there. The problems with this term Asian American, bearing in mind that it was a politically strategic move to bring people together for advocacy and political purposes, the problems with this are that this coalition term masks tremendous heterogeneity within this population. You have Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, Laotian, Hmong, Filipinos, Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshi, and the list can go on and on and on. And when you start disaggregating those groups, you can see that it is harder and harder to maintain a narrative of some kind of shared history outside of the United States. The aggregated data also masks this second set of bullet points, that there are tremendous disparities and inequalities, inequities that are endured by different ethnic groups within Asian America. So socioeconomic status, it is well known, and the Pew Research Center report emphasized the fact that there is such a high level of middle class and upper middle class socioeconomic attainment. That high level of success masks tremendous levels of poverty among Southeast Asian refugee immigrants, for example. Okay, educational attainment, again, we have a high levels of educational attainment in some communities and very low levels of even finishing high school, much less matriculating into college among other communities. Citizenship status, different communities have different histories of relationship, of their homeland's relationship with the United States. And that has produced disparities among what different communities, what claims different communities can make or feel entitled to make or advance on behalf of their own communities. And this is another table from the Pew Center report, and this illustrates very clearly, if you look right in this area, you have median household income, very good numbers here, college degree or higher, majority percentages in most of the cases, foreign born, and this is another thing to flag, is that we are moving from population demographic that in 1960s during the student movements when Asian American Coalition was brought together, we had a population that was a majority second, third, or even fourth generation American-born Asians. And we have slowly moved to where we have overwhelming majority of within the Asian American population now being foreign-born. Okay, so when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, there are very, very important issues here involving the fact that there are these disparities that have gone unacknowledged because of this umbrella term, Asian American, that puts everybody together and says we're all doing well. So part of one of the questions here with diversity is how can an appreciation for Asian and Asian American diversity be fostered? What is it that Asian Americans can bring to the table in terms of life experiences, worldviews, norms of behavior that add to the pool of diversity resources available to us? In terms of equity, okay, given the fact that there are vast socioeconomic disparities and underrepresentation among some communities, but not others, the question becomes how can equitable access to opportunity be fostered for all Asian Americans? And our panel today focuses specifically on one sector, Asian and Asian American faculty within the university institution. And thirdly, with respect to inclusion, given the fact that there are all of these stereotypes that continue to persist toward Asians and Asian Americans of being a model minority, silent minority, well-behaved, high-achieving, we have, for every one of these stereotypes, we have opposite kinds of indicators there. So then the question becomes, how can the appreciation for Asian and Asian American diversity be productively linked to equitable opportunity in order to ensure the inclusion of Asians and Asian Americans in all facets of U.S. society? So our panel today, our roundtable session, is going to be focusing, as I said, on the question of equity and inclusion of Asian Americans in the higher education system, and in particular with looking very specifically at the University of Michigan cases. And these 4 bullet points are in the printed program that you all have here, along with the cast of characters of our speakers today. So we are going to go in order that people are listed here. And we have my colleagues here and our esteemed colleague from the American Council of Education, Dr. Kim Bobby. He is here to provide us with a broader national context of a very serious issue facing Asian Americans. And then my other colleagues here, all here from U of M, have different perspectives to provide to us on different facets of data and to raise issues and questions. This will be followed by an open discussion. We will have time for an open discussion. And at the end, Vice Provost Rob Sellers has very, very graciously agreed to offer us some comments about what next steps are possible from his perspective. Okay, so first, our first panelist is Dr. Kim Bobby, who is director of the Inclusive Excellence Initiative at the American Council of Education. Okay.
Thank you. I'm just going to stay. Okay. Maybe I'm not going to stay seated. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank Dean Martin for this convening, and I'd like to thank John Burkhart and Marie Tink for reaching out to me and inviting me to join you here today and to give the national perspective on this very important subject matter that we share with you in advancing Asian Americans into leadership positions in higher education. The context for ACE is that we are the largest ACE is the largest higher education organization, and it seeks to coordinate advocacy efforts for the entire higher education community. We influence policy through advocacy, research, and programs and initiatives. Can I see hands of those who are familiar with ACE? Oh, good. That's about half the room. That's good. So my role at ACE is in the Division of Leadership Programs. And we focus on leadership pipeline programs through serving our membership and in many times even those institutions that aren't memberships with special interest in creating access and equity for those institutions that might otherwise not be able to participate in leadership programs, and that we feel access is important to make sure that the composition of leadership in higher education is reflective of the communities that we serve. So my role is as the director of the Inclusive Excellence Group. We have a suite of programs that focus on outreach to underrepresented leaders and women who are underrepresented in the leadership of higher education. Specifically, we have women's forums and the Spectrum programs. And our programs focus on, in particular, making sure that it's about human connection. And we make sure that our programs are the doorway by which the entire suite of leadership programs achieve greater diversity. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about our American College President report that we put out every 5 years. And it's focused on gathering information about the pipeline to the presidency. Now, we're talking about faculty today, but I know that is a part of the pipeline. We know everyone doesn't desire to hold a presidency, but I think we need to have a diverse group of leaders in all sectors of higher education to make sure that good presidents have good teams all along the pipeline. So I'm going to talk about the presidency a lot because that's ultimately how we achieve real leadership and diversity in higher education and broader decision making, serving more communities. But along the way, the pipeline matters, and the pipeline has to be diverse. It has to have individuals that are called to lead from all communities. And so that's sort of a context of what I'm going to say today. So we know that the clicker. Okay. So this is a graph that gives you some information from our from 3 of our American College Presidency reports, and it kind of gives you the progression of Asian or Pacific Islander college and university presidents. And we know that many times the first opportunity is stepping into a leadership role as department chair. And that's where our leadership programs begin, with mid-level department chair on through CAO, on through deans, and so forth, provost. And so we're able to see here in this information, what the breakdown is currently from our 2012 report. Our next report is going to come out next year. And so we're hoping that because of the things that we're doing inside of ACE leadership, we're going to see these numbers change when we look at the leadership pipeline for Asian American presidents. Please stop me if you have any questions or want to delve into any of these data points at any time. Any questions on that one?
Can you just share some of the highlights?
Okay, you can't see very well. Okay. So, okay, thank you. I don't know how to do it. Oh, okay. So if you look at this year, this is our most recent year, we see that Asian American presidents at this last study were 1.53%. And so you can see that it has progressed almost steadily since our 2002 report. We also see that women are still underrepresented in the presidency, and that's something that our group, the Inclusive Excellence Group, specifically focuses on. You can see the average age, which is slightly younger than our last report. The average age of college presidents in our last report was 61 and older. And so that is creating some opportunities as we think about retirements that are coming, and why we need to be focused on the pipeline and making sure that we have individuals from diverse groups to fill that pipeline and to fill those retirements. The average retirement, the average tenure now for presidents is about 7 years. So, we see some opportunities coming there. Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering what the raw number is. Like 1% is 1% of what number, or 1.53% is a percent of what number?
The number of presidents that that answered this survey was 1658.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other question? And we can see what type of sector the presidents, Asian presidents, are serving in. We can see here that four-year publics, private nonprofit, for-profit, and public 2 years, the highest, 40%. And private nonprofit, 4 years, the next. We see their level of education. The highest is a PhD or EDD at 80%. And this slide shows us where the field, their major field of degree was earned. We don't have it for computer science, but from our last report, these are the categories that the presidents emerged from. And if you can't see in the back, the largest one is education, higher education, and then the second are computer science and engineering. Any questions?
The overall numbers are really small, but are there any statistical differences between the Asian presidents and the population for any of these characteristics?
Well, I think I think for women, you see more women in community college settings as presidents than you see men. And I think for the degree that they emerged from, I think this is pretty much on par. But overall, you see more minority presidents serving in the community college sector. And this slide shows us the pathway to the presidency. The number of years in the classroom, the number of years primarily as an indicator as opposed to the whole, the number of years employed outside of education, And this talks about the search process. We know there's still a lot of bias, unconscious bias in the search process. And so our next report is going to try to tease out more of those lived experiences in the search process that might hinder one's candidacy in a presidency. And we see number of interviews, but we don't have it for this time. We know that this, our last report, 20% of college presidents came outside of higher education, but they're no more diverse. They're still majority male and white. We see that that number is very stubborn as well. And we know that the pathway to the presidency is the most dominant pathway, and that's just kind of to sum those slides up. So the number of Asian Pacific Islander presidents in our last study was 25. So back to your question, sir, about the number. It's pretty small. And we know that the most predominant pathway to the college presidency is the chief academic officer. And so the distribution by race and ethnicity is similar for 2-year and 4-year institutions. People of color make up 14% of the CAOs, compared to being 42% of the population. So we have some real work to do. And that's why our group is focused on capturing this kind of information. And if you look, once again, you see that there's not much diversity in the CAO ranks. And that is the most dominant pathway to the college presidency. And when you break that down by gender, once again, you still have it predominantly male. So what is all this about? What are we doing about it? So we know the problem. We know that we're not getting enough diversity in the pipeline. We study, and we've conducted studies. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the ACE publication. This is online, called Raising Voices, Lifting Leaders, Empowering Asian Pacific Islander American Leadership in Higher Education. This was done in 2011, and we're hoping to replicate this study and have much more granular information for you within the next couple of years. So look for us for this publication. I'll make sure you all know about it. So in our programs, we, once again, when I came to ACE in 2012, I noticed that there, being the director of the Inclusive Excellence Group, I had been a part of ACE and going to the national annual meeting for about 10 years, and I had actually participated in some of the diversity pipeline programs myself. And when I came, I sort of had a fire that in my belly that I was going to change things and make things different, and I was going to bring to bear some of my engagements when I was at the University of Puget Sound as the first chief diversity officer, and how we made some gains with building coalitions and building community and being purposeful and staying connected. And so I brought that to our programs, and my team, we purposely focus on, in our registrations for our programs, a focus on demographic, racial, ethnic diversity. And the Asian Americans population is a focus of our target because it's one of the smallest. And I can say that when I came to ACE, it was hit or miss. It was hit or miss. And I think everyone cares. But I think it's really important to have people that have their eye on a laser focus on these issues, because everyone cares about a lot of different things. But my group is where we made a concerted effort to look at the numbers, reach out to people from the different ethnic and racial groups and say, how did you feel in this experience in your programs with us? Can you give me some feedback as we're starting to shape new programs? What would you like to see? Can you help me unpack some of the ways that we can serve you better? And when I talk specifically, I'm talking about the conversations with my colleagues from the Asian community, they talked about being more purposeful, more outreach. There's this stereotype that Asian people don't want to lead, and that's not true. And so I have an advisory group. I call on people when we have events. I say, can you recommend someone? Can you help me find people in the community that want to lead and make sure they have access to our programs? How can I follow up? What can I do? And this has been a practice in our group, and I'm very pleased to say that even though the numbers are small, we start out with about 20 to 35. That's our span of participants in each program. But we average about 12% for each program from the Asian community, and that's because of relationships. and asking people to help us, asking people to help us identify leaders, people that are called to lead, and asking us how can we make sure that the program and the content is beneficial. Because good leadership means that all voices have to come to the table and help us shape a meaningful experience. And so that's what I've been engaged in. I'm happy to say that I've also, I have this, I call Sprint thinks they have a network. I have the ACE Women's Network. And so through the ACE Women's Network, right now we have 47 active ACE Women's Networks. And this includes allies. Men are a part of the network as well. And a part of our focus in cultivating leadership in higher education also is through the ACE Women's Networks. And we have presidential sponsors for each of the networks. We have institutional representatives. Michigan just won the ACE Women's Network Leadership Award. They have a Women of Color Summit every year that is a model. And so it takes these kinds of engagements so we can look at these numbers, but they're not going to change if we don't change our behavior. And so that's what my team is challenging us to do. It challenges our ACE Women's Networks. We have a program called the Spectrum Executive Leadership Program at ACE, and that includes men and women. The Spectrum Executive Leadership Program is proud to have 66 participants, 4 of which are Asian Americans, and we have 11 that have moved into senior leadership ranks, including the presidency, since 2012. We are always trying to make sure that we can represent the communities across higher education, and so I think it's really important for us to say there's no there. We have to be continuous about this work, and we have to be focused on partnerships. And my office has done a tremendous job at getting partnerships to support the moving the needle, advancing women and diversity in higher education. And if you go to our website and you look at moving the needle, we put a call to action out in December. And as of today, I have 350 presidents and chancellors around the nation that have signed on to this call to action to diversify higher education leadership. And I'm very proud. I think your president's there too. But now we're saying the next question is, how are you planning to actualize your commitment? And so that is where these kind of convenings are very important. This is an opportunity to see leaders coming together. The faculty ranks are very important, but there's a lot of your faculty, our faculty here in the Asian community who people don't know that they want to lead. I think that we need to uncover that and support that desire to lead. We have our, I know I sound like a commercial for ACE, but I think the only way to make change is to have people engaged and network. And come together. And so I put out some brochures out front. So we have a brochure on the Moving the Needle initiative. This is, as I said, the national initiative with presidents all around the nation. And we have this brochure shows you all of our upcoming leadership programs, and there are scholarship opportunities available. So, I mean, we want to set the table for easy engagement, and so that's why I'm sharing this information with you. And then we have our upcoming programs from the Inclusive Excellence Group, and those are out front on the table. So I would like for any of you who are interested to please talk with me, take advantage of these opportunities, and share these opportunities. If it's not your desire to lead or to be a part of these programs, take them back, share with others who might be interested, because that's how we're going to make a difference and change these numbers. Because even though we have faculty, Asians are overrepresented in the faculty, but the leadership ranks, to really make change in higher education and resemble the communities we serve, I really do believe that we have to have presidencies that represent all communities across higher education. So are there any other questions? Okay, I think that's it for me for all my data.
Thank you.
This is why we're gonna stay. We had this master plan to stay seated, right?
Too bad we don't have a screen in the back,
I know.
because otherwise I'm blinded.
Our next presentation comes from reporting out of a collaborative research and analysis done on 2 data sets. One data set, a national data set, and the other data set from University of Michigan data from the advanced program. The research was directed by Fiona Lee, who is the Arthur Thurnau Professor and Associate Chair of Psychology. And she could not be here today, but her collaborator, Amy Westmoreland-Coe, will be presenting on the team's behalf. And Amy is a doctoral candidate in psychology, so please welcome Amy Westmoreland-Coe.
So good afternoon. So thank you for having me. So I am a doctoral candidate in the Department of Psychology. So the first part of this talk, I really just want to talk about more data on Asian glass ceiling in higher education. So in particular, I want to share with you analyses I have done with the psychology faculty Fiona Lee. When we look at a national sample of faculty members representing thousands of colleges and universities in the US. We also have data from advanced about Asian faculty at University of Michigan. And then lastly, although the data I'm going to present doesn't speak to why we see a glass ceiling for Asian faculty, but if we do have time, I want to share some thoughts about how racial stereotypes do play a role in perceptions of Asians as effective leaders. So first, let me share with you some preliminary findings from a national data set. So this data comes from the Higher Education Research Initiative's faculty survey, which is housed at UCLA. So this is a survey of faculty in 2- and 4-year colleges and universities, and it's a survey that is collected every 3 years. And it includes lecturers, instructors, and tenure-track faculty. So for the analyses I'm going to show you today, I'm only using the 2 most recent years of data collection, which includes a little more than 67,000 faculty, and mostly male, mostly white. So leadership was coded based on whether they have taken a leadership role at any time in their career. So that includes being a department chair, dean, a provost, vice president, and president. So just because of the way our analyses worked and just because of the racial breakdown in our sample, we just lumped all the leadership categories together. So yes means they served in leadership in their academic lifetime, and no means they have not. So what we're looking at is the probability that Asian faculty have served in a leadership position compared to white, blacks, and Latino faculty. So for our analysis, we wanted to understand whether race predicts chances of serving in leadership. However, there are several non-race related explanations for why there might be a leadership disparity. So for example, someone's chances for leadership may be affected by their research productivity, as measured by the number of publications they have. It could be explained by the level of seniority or academic rank or tenure status. Some believe that for Asian faculty, that culture plays a role in whether Asian faculty seek out leadership positions. This data set did not have any variables for acculturation. So as a proxy, we used US citizenship status. And then lastly, we looked at the variable of personal importance placed on service. So some people also believe that Asian faculty place less importance on service and they place more importance on research. So for analyses, we find that regardless of all of the non-race related explanations for the leadership disparity that I just showed, and regardless of gender, and regardless of the year of data collection, we still see a discrepancy based on race. So in this graph, the Y bar is the odds of having a leadership role. So what we see is that compared to Asian faculty, white faculty have a 1.47 higher odds of serving in leadership, black faculty have a 1.53 higher odds of serving in leadership, and Latino faculty have a 1.43 higher odds of serving in leadership. And again, these racial differences are regardless of their research productivity, it's regardless of their academic rank or tenure status, US citizenship status, personal importance placed on research, gender, or year of data collection. And then these findings are also pretty consistent with Kim's work from ACE. So this is what the national data looks like. So I also wanted to show you what the data looks like at the University of Michigan. So to look at the representation of Asian leaders at U of M, we turn to advanced data. So I presume that we all know what advanced does. So they examined data of U of M faculty, and I want to show you some trends from the data collected in 2012. So this data is publicly available, so you can look it up after today. So it's on their website. And the reason we're using 2012 and not the more recent 2014 or 2015 report is just because 2012 has more fine-grained data that's publicly available. So this data is for LSA. It's combined natural sciences, humanities, and social sciences. So we see here that 17% of all assistant professors are Asian, 10% of all associate professors are Asian, and 7% of all full professors are Asian. So as you can see, Asian faculty are well represented in all ranks. And then just comparing rates of Asian professors at U of M with national data, we see evidence of U of M's commitment to diversity. So U of M is in the maize bars and has a higher representation of Asian faculty compared to the national data in the blue bars at every faculty rank. So not surprisingly, the representation of Asian faculty declines with more senior ranks, but you can see a lot of Asians coming down the pipeline. So the advanced data, it also shows that Asian faculty are promoted at a pretty fast rate. So we would expect that increasing representation of Asian faculty at the full professor rank over time. So if Asian faculty are rising up the ranks and succeeding, what about the representation in university leadership is the next question. So by leadership, I mean holding formal roles that have some power to affect change. So here leadership is probably related to but somewhat decoupled from task competence. So the next question I'm going to show you is whether increasing representation of Asian faculty among more senior ranks also translates to seeing more Asian faculty assuming top leadership roles at U of M. So the leadership roles that I'm really including here are mostly nominated, elected, or appointed positions. So this includes chair professorships, college tenure and promotion committee, which is college TNP, university or college level administrative positions, such as deans, and then the college executive committee. So what we see in LSA is among Asian faculty in LSA, out of 204 professorships, 4% are given to Asian faculty, 8% of the administrative roles are taken by Asian faculty, and no Asian faculty serve on the college tenure and promotion or the college executive committee. Just keep in mind, however, that these are pretty small numbers. So an increase of one person can make a big difference in terms of the percentage or the proportion. So 8% looks like a big number, but out of 24 people, that means 2 Asian faculty. And just comparing Asian faculty to faculty who are typically assigned to the underrepresented minority category that we use here at U of M, we see that there is a smaller percentage of Asian faculty in the maize bars at various leadership positions compared to underrepresented minority groups in the blue bars. The only exception to this is the college executive committee, where there are no Asian or underrepresented minority faculty. So just to summarize, so to start out positive, Michigan has a higher percentage of tenure track Asian faculty compared to a national database. This echoes Michigan's commitment to diversity. So go blue. So, however, the problem is that the glass ceiling still exists. Some might try to explain away this glass ceiling by saying that Asian faculty in leadership don't want to be in leadership because of cultural differences between Asia or the US, or that Asian faculty simply are more interested in research than service. But based on analyses of the national data, we still see that Asian faculty are less likely to serve in leadership, regardless of their US citizenship status, personal interest in service, academic rank, number of publications, or tenure status. And at U of M, we even see that Asian faculty are less likely to serve in leadership compared to groups that are typically categorized as underrepresented minorities. So for next steps, I suggest reframing dialogue on race and Asians in the academy. So typically when we talk about race in the academy, Asians are not included in the category of underrepresented minority. And in my work with Dr. Lee, we're looking at the role racial stereotypes might play in perceptions of Asians as effective leaders. So one stereotype that we look at is the model minority myth, or the stereotype that Asians are highly intelligent but lack in social ability. So for next step that I'm happy to talk more about in Q&A is how the model minority myth and the belief that Asians only have positive stereotypes is used to silence Asians' marginalized experiences of racial experiences. But luckily at U of M, we have forums like this where we can start to have important dialogue unpacking Asians' experiences in higher education. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'd like to welcome the next speaker, John Kwada.
Well, thank you. And I wanted to also thank all of you for attending, and especially Dean Martin and Vice Provost Sellers. And so I'm going to continue this theme. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what things look like in LSA. So, so what's the problem? Well, it's pretty clear. There are practically no Asian faculty members in leadership positions in LSA. 0 out of 6 LSA deans and associate deans are Asian. 1 out of 30 departmental chair is Asian. 0 out of 10 program and institute directors. 0 out of 6 museum directors. 0 out of 6 members of the college executive committee are Asian. And this has basically been unchanged since 2012 when I first started to get interested in this and started to kind of pay attention to these numbers. And in fact, since 2002, you know, there are 6 executive committee members. And since 2002, that's nearly 15 years, we've had 1 Asian faculty member on the executive committee. And that really shocked me, quite frankly. Okay, so I'm not going to talk a long time. This is just a listing of all the various departmental chairs and directors, et cetera. The faculty representation in various kinds of leadership. And highlighted in yellow there is statistics. And in fact, statistics has the last 3, including the present chair has been Asian. And without statistics, we would have been down to 0% the entire time point. Thank God for statistics. Anyways, so why does this problem exist? I mean, I think it's quite obvious. It's there's little appreciation by us, by the Asian faculty, as well as our non-Asian colleagues within LSA, that this problem actually exists. I don't think the dean's office nor the U of M executive officers are particularly cognizant of this, at least within the past several years. Okay, and of course, because of that, there's no priority to remedy this. We're essentially invisible, right? That's the idea. I mean, that's the kind of duality of a glass ceiling, is that it prevents Asians from going higher, and it's a one-way mirror, so essentially we're invisible. And so what have we been doing about this? We haven't exactly been sitting on our hands. So in 2012, this kind of data was compiled and was sent to all Asian faculty members in the U of M. The next year, this was brought to the attention of then Dean Terry McDonald. Later that year, a small group of us met then the interim dean, Gelman, and the provost, Martha Pollack, to discuss this issue. And later in that year, when we heard about the nominations committee, we encouraged the nominations committee to consider Asian faculty members for the various kinds of positions that are being considered under the elections. And let's see. And then also in the same year, a group of Asian faculty actually sent the U of M regents a letter defining for them what we thought was a problem here within the university, and requesting that this be a consideration when they're looking for a leader of the University of Michigan. I might say that as far as I know, the search committee did not include any Asians. And then we have this today, which I think is terrific, and I hope will propel. In fact, there is a group of Asian faculty who are now quite determined to form a group of Asian faculty and staff who will then represent the interests of Asian faculty and staff, and be in the face of the administration. So we have learned that you have to be squeaky to get greased, and so that's what we intend to do. Okay, and so what can be done? I hope we can discuss this later on, but here's some ideas. I think one is that the LSA nominations committee should consistently have an Asian faculty member on it to promote to put forward Asian candidates for the various kinds of positions. I think it would be useful for the LSA Executive Committee and the Dean to have annual meetings discussing not just diversity as a whole, but in specifically the status of Asian faculty in leadership positions. And of course, we encourage the university to include us whenever these diversity issues are being considered on a university-wide level. So I'll stop there and take any questions if you have. No, but please, let's discuss some more what we can do, because if we don't speak up, nothing's going to happen. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, our next panelist to speak is Professor San Duan Mu, who's a professor of linguistics in LSA, and he has been active in the formation and involvement in the Association of Chinese Professors at University of Michigan, who have organized themselves. So he is going to share with us some remarks about that.
Thank you, Amy. So I'm asked to just give some background of the Association of Chinese Professors. This is not an official organization here, but made of some professors starting in 2002. I think at that time there was nothing here. When I came, I met a few people at the welcome party the first year. And then at my tenure ceremony, I met a few same people there. And then we said, we're gonna be here for a long time. We better, meet more often. Then about 20 or so professors who were tenured or on tenure track decided to set up this organization. And our original idea was to, so the mission was to be a support group, first of all, a social community to promote mutual support and interactions among members. Second is to promote research and teaching, how to thrive at University of Michigan and how to excel as an educator and researcher. And third is to promote international exchange. So currently we have about 300 people on the mailing list, but the mailing list again is volunteer-based, so it's not always clear how many people are active, but we have a new website. The current president is very active, asking each person to put up something of yourself. So about 100 people put up something about themselves. So that's active members. So based on 2008 numbers, when I was the president, Ann Arbor has, so there were about 200 people. Ann Arbor has 86%, Dearborn 11%, and Flint 2%. And also at that year, LSA had 24 members, 18 of them in natural sciences, 5 in social sciences, and 1 in humanities. So most of them were engineers and natural sciences. But I also have to mention that I knew at that time at least there are 3 humanities people, me being one, and one in ALC, a literature professor, and another person in history. And then they didn't just join. They were invisible. So finances, Lester Mount's office gave us some money a little bit every year. And then members donate a lot of money to run the activities. This year, for example, 3 members donated $2,000 each to hold the annual meeting, I'm glad to say. We have done various events. So we used to have a fall picnic every year to welcome new faculty members, and then an annual meeting. to do elections. There is a ladies fitness club who do hiking every week and socializing. There was a research interest salon. People talk about what they do and just to learn from each other and possibly develop collaborations. There was a workshop on tenure process for new junior members and workshop on international collaboration. How do you deal with colleagues in China and what kind of problems you might run into? Workshop on teaching undergraduate classes. That used to be a problem for international faculty members. And informal discussions on grants and services to the profession. You know, how many journal requests should you be doing every year and how much time you spend on it. So it's usually casual and mostly social. So we haven't really got involved in this until the last time that there was a search of a university leadership position, and we talk about writing letters to the office. But yeah, so perhaps there is more to do, but the associate hasn't done much except just socializing at this point. Thank you.
So Amy, I'll need a clicker, I think.
Oh, yes. Okay, next we have Evans Young, who is Assistant Dean for Undergraduate Education in LSA. He stands as a representation of someone who has gained an office assignment outside of regular departmental structures, and I've asked him to share some of his perspectives on this issue of Asian and Asian American faculty and leadership positions on this campus from his perspective in the college office.
So I should clarify that I am not a faculty member. I stopped doing that a long time ago, and I'm in a staff role. So what I'd like to do is to speak from two different case examples, and then make a turn towards signaling leadership intentions and hopes, and also pointing to some resources that are available. So first, a very quick case, because this is a national election year, and I think a number of faculty in the room have stood for election in LSA elections to the executive committee, to the curriculum committee, and also the Senate Assembly. Some have succeeded in the past and some have not. So this is an annual call from the college committee for nominations. It comes from the nominating committee that John referenced. It goes to chairs and directors for election to the college executive committee, and et cetera. In the process, I think there's several screens or gatekeepers, if you will, where one's skills are examined, where unconscious bias may enter, and where interpersonal networks come into play. So there's always people at these different points. So the immediate players are the chair, and that's really very, very key. The nominating committee of the college, which chooses 4 people to be on a slate to stand for election for each open position. When the slate is submitted to a meeting of the LSA faculty, one can stand for election too, individually. And then the faculty themselves are also voting on what they see in the way of the credentials or the experience or the vision and the goals of any particular candidate. So service on elected committees like these can be one arena for faculty to signal their interest in higher level administration at the university and in college. I think actually a closer to hand arena is service in the department. And you'll see, I think Kim referenced chair roles as being really very important. My guess is that if we did the research on LSA and U of M, we would find that this level of leadership, up from committee work in the department, other kinds of work in the department, the associate chairs and then the chairs, is really very crucial. The second case example I want to show you just quickly, I hope, is the Academic Leadership Program, which is run out of the Provost's office as part of a CIC program. And what I want to do is flash these pictures by you. Some of these people, I hope you can see it well enough, will be familiar to you. Others are very familiar to you. So each year, the 15 CIC institutions participate in an annual academic leadership program. They appoint a class totaling 75 fellows who attend 3 seminars over the course of a year of 2.5 days each. They do this with an eye towards preparing future faculty leaders. The seminars focus on big picture concerns such as the future of public research universities like ours, university budget models, how globalization affects higher education. The nominated faculty, they say themselves, and how they announce these programs at U of M at least, typically include associate deans, department chairs, and other faculties who have shown leadership ability. So this is one stage beyond, but it's getting to the level of deans that the group of faculty here at U of M and in LSA are most concerned about. Finally, at this point, the screens in the process are really the Provost's office at U of M after seeking nominations from the dean. So you have to get through the dean, and then you have to get through the nominations in the Provost's office as well. And they select 4 or 5 fellows. So here's the visual that you can see. You can see Jim Panahan there. And he was associate chair, I think, or was he chair in chemistry?
He's chair of biophysics.
It's chair of biophysics.
Yeah.
Right. Meredith Wu Cummings, who did not come up through the ranks in LSA, but she came here already at a higher level of appointment. She was associate dean in LSA for a year in 06-07. You'll recognize Myron Campbell, who was chair of physics for a little bit, long little bit, I think. You may recognize in the upper left-hand corner Cleo Caldwell, who just got a $3 million grant to extend her Flint Fathers and Sons program to Chicago. That came from the NIH. You'll see Phil Deloria in the middle, who was associate dean in LSA. You'll see Alec Gallimore, who was associate dean in engineering and now has been named to be the dean upcoming. You'll see Jack Hu, who also was an associate dean in engineering and is now vice president for research. Twyla Tharp speaks several dialects of Chinese, but I don't think she counts here. She's in the lower left-hand corner. She's quite fluent. She was an associate dean in LSA, and she's moved on to other endeavors. Bottom in the middle, Rob Sellers. He's sitting in the back of the room still, I think. He clearly, as you know, was chair of psych for a good number of years before accepting the position. Also, you know Brad Orr there. He's was in the program as chair of physics. I don't know Yen Chen in the School of Information. She's new to me. Denise Silva on the right-hand side in the red is South Asian. And in this one, the LSA faculty member is really in the upper right-hand corner, Christina Moreras Minor. And here, I don't know Peter Ma, but of course you recognize Doug Richstone, who was chair of astronomy and is now associate dean in LSA. So these are people who've been picked out of the experiences at the associate dean level already. You can imagine easily the work they did in the departments to become department chairs, and some of them, 1 or 2 of them, associate chairs. And I think that this is important for looking a little bit deeper into the points at which various decisions are made by individuals. There's always the concern, of course, at the higher levels, that giving someone an administrative position might take away from their attention to their research agendas. That's a serious concern. I don't think it's necessarily stereotyping, but that's worth something worth looking into. So I think that when you humanize this whole process, you realize that the faculty themselves make decisions on whether or not they want to begin going down the track. And when they do it well, they do it because they've made some decision about the goals, the values that they want to pursue in an administrative leadership role. There's always trade-offs. There are paths not taken, not the least of which is research. There's postponed research and writing, which often goes on much longer than any administrator initially anticipates. There's time away from the family. At the University of Michigan, we do have some very good resources. Chiefly, you'll find them in the advanced program. It's not working. There we go. Oh, sorry, this you can't read it all. But those are links for the advanced program, and you'll see, especially, for example, there's core competency seminars that they've had in advance. These are only 2 a year, so it's not very many, but you can see in the subject matter of those seminars some of the things that one looks for and it is are a set of considerations when you think about leadership. So work-life balance, does the faculty member really have that figured out? That could be code for gender considerations. You have to watch for that. Managing time across, as they put it, multiple universes. And when you're in those positions, you realize how it is really many universes, not just worlds. How to run meetings that matter. Navigating department politics, which is also another point at which you might think about certain stereotyping and unconscious biases. Having difficult conversations. There's also a faculty leading change year-long program which has somewhat modest grants, $5,000. It's a deadline of this June 1st for proposals that you might try to mount in terms of creating a program for change in the department. These are informal networks as well, and San has mentioned a really strong one in among the Chinese faculty. Also on this list, which you can't see, sorry, is HERS, the Higher Education Resource Services. They have some training programs. Also the ACE, American Council on Education, that Kim represents. That's a link there. I can send you this slide if you're interested, but you can easily look them up yourself. And finally, there's a Berkeley program, which is somewhat expensive, the Center for Studies in Higher Education, an Executive Leadership Academy.
Wonderful. Okay, our final panelist is Dr. Lila Fernandez, who is the Glenda Dickerson Professor of Women's Studies and Professor of Political Science in LSA. And she was involved this year as one of the members of the LSA Task Force on Faculty Diversity. I forgot to mention that this specific event was an outgrowth of the focus group that the Task Force on Faculty Diversity held for Asian and Asian American faculty. So Leela is going to share with us some updates of the task force's work.
Thank you, Amy. So I'm going to be brief because I know you've been sitting through many presentations. Can everyone hear me? Yes. So as Amy Stillman said, I've been asked to provide a brief update on the task force that has been working on LSA's faculty strategic plan on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The task force, as many of you know, has been working for a long time, since September, on a set of recommendations based on an analysis of both quantitative and qualitative data, both from advanced and from open faculty meetings that were scheduled earlier this semester. I'm going to just begin by summarizing some of the general trends that came out of the open faculty meetings that we held. In the open faculty meetings that the task force facilitated, faculty expressed that their work in support of diversity, equity, and inclusion is often unrecognized, uncompensated, and sometimes misunderstood. In the area of research, they described disciplinary hierarchies that valued certain kinds of research, for example, theoretical universal over others, for example, applied, particular, or region or culture specific. Often these hierarchies replicated histories of privilege and inequality. In their teaching, faculty discussed perceptions by students that instructors teaching diversity, equity-related material had less credibility or expertise about their subject matter. In the area of service, faculty described a thick layer of informal and often invisible work, including responding to urgent concerns of individual students and student organizations, taking on advising roles for struggling graduate students, or playing the role of advocate on graduate admissions committees. Many faculty said that the failure by their department and the college to recognize and value this work was a barrier to their professional advancements and personal well-being. Many of the concerns which I've outlined briefly were strongly expressed in the open faculty meeting with Asian and Asian American faculty. This meeting was in fact one of the meetings with the strongest attendances, which shows you the level of interest of Asian and Asian American faculty. And by my count, almost everyone present in the room actually spoke and participated in the discussion. The concerns which I've just outlined were expressed by Asian and Asian American faculty and those concerned about these issues. And in addition to that, they also strongly emphasized two additional points. The first one builds on what has already been said so far, which is that open faculty meetings described faculty experiences and perceptions of the specific exclusion of Asian American faculty from positions of institutional leadership in almost every aspect of the college, ranging from chair appointments to significant college committees such as the executive committee. In addition, faculty also expressed views of the ways in which Asian American faculty are either erased or strategically deployed through institutional languages of diversity. That is a lack of consistency of when Asian American faculties count or do not count, so that sometimes Asian American faculties are sort of referred to as part of the norms of diversity of the institution, and sometimes they are systematically either rendered invisible or simply not seen. And that was a key issue which many faculty in the open meeting talked about. So I'll talk a little bit now about some of the recommendations which are currently being drafted and discussed in response to the data that the task force has been analyzing. I'll start with a sort of qualifier. The recommendations which I'm presenting or sort of summarizing in general are very preliminary, they're advisory. They're still being reviewed by legal counsel, the Dean's Cabinet, and the LSNA Executive Committee. So this is a very sort of preliminary set of findings. And my understanding also is that there will be an opportunity for faculty to read the entire plan and to give feedback, mostly through an online basis. So the recommendations which we have been working on are general recommendations. They're not specific to divisions, and they're not specific to specific faculty communities. They address the need to develop criteria for new forms of merit that recognize excellence in diversity, equity, and inclusion in the areas of research, teaching, and service. And they also focus on a number of specific recommendations that address three areas. The first has to do with climate and faculty retention. And the kinds of recommendations which are being discussed range from institutionalizing practices that track and evaluate the process through which retention offers are made, to providing support for faculty to build community networks which can address some of the isolation that faculty often experience at the University of Michigan. I'll just say as a side note, in terms of retention, one of the findings that we discussed in the task force that for retention issues, women and faculty of color, according to some of the advanced data, often indicate that lack of leadership opportunities is often a significant reason for leaving the University of Michigan. And given what has been said about the exclusion of Asian American faculty from leadership, that there may be specific issues of retention that we want to think about in relationship to this particular set of issues. The second area which we have been discussing in the task force has to do with recruitment. The kinds of recommendations we are discussing here range from establishing departmental diversity recruitment plans for hiring to creating new postdoctoral fellowship opportunities to bring junior scholars who are committed to diversity to campus. So basically practices that are designed to expand faculty who are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And finally, the third area has to do with faculty mentoring and career advising. This was, again, a very significant theme which was talked about in almost all of the open faculty meetings. And we are discussing recommendations that range from providing a standardized mentoring system to all new LSNA faculty along the lines of the launch program, to conducting a review of mentoring plans in every LSNA department and assessing how the plans are implemented, as well as providing training and support for faculty who mentor. So I think I will just conclude by saying that these are highlights of which give you sort of a general tenor of what we're discussing. And I think the idea was for us to also think about particular practices that can address some of the concerns that people here have been expressing. Thank you.
Oh. Whoops. Sorry. Okay, so we've had a lot of presentations, a lot of data, a lot of analysis, a lot of advocacy. We'd like to open the floor for discussion, and I want to put this question back up from my remarks earlier. How can an appreciation for Asian and Asian American diversity be productively linked to equitable opportunity to ensure meaningful inclusion of Asian and Asian Americans in all facets of University of Michigan institutional life and practices? So I'd like to open the floor for questions or comments, please, the panelists are also included. And we have a microphone. Do we have a microphone runner? Yes, we have a microphone runner. If you could please speak into the microphone because we are recording today's events. Thank you.
My question is not based on the experiences of the University of Michigan, but from another state university of Michigan. And I was wondering if there is any correlation between the opportunities that are opened to Asian Americans within the university related to our political power in the country. Because I have noticed that certain groups seem to have more access than some other groups. And I'll give you my personal experience. I was with another state university in Michigan. And I was a little bit in administration, and when there was an opening for assistant to the vice president, academic vice president of the university, I applied for it. And the secretary who received the application told me, Dr. Samonte, let me tell you that you may not have any chance. Why? I said, they're looking for a black American applicant. And I wondered about how this played, because I said, I don't think we have as much political clout in the country at that time as another group. And I was wondering if there's any relationship to the opportunities that are open to us or not open to us because of that particular variable.
Does anybody want to speak to that?
Well, I hope things are actually changing. I just heard on the radio today as I was driving in that during the last presidential elections there were 5 million new voters. 2 million were African American, 2 million were Latino American, and practically 700,000 were Asian Americans. And that of those, greater than 90% new voters, 75% voted for President Obama. And so I think that does speak to the issue that the various groups, and especially I would say that the Asian American group is probably the fastest growing group in terms of political power, but we were just beginning. And so, unfortunately, you ran into a situation that was probably a little while ago, and hopefully those kinds of issues will not come up now. And the other thing to think about is it's not a limited pie. The different groups are not competing with each other. That is the wrong way to look at things. We just want to get as much diversity as possible. And if the various groups start to think about just we against them, then we've undone all the gains that we're trying to hope for.
So related to that, my lab, we actually run a series of experiments. So we show someone a job candidate, and we ask someone, would you put this job candidate in a leadership position in this mysterious large company that we don't give a name to? So the job candidate either fits the model minority stereotypes, the job candidate is really smart, but doesn't have a lot of social skills. So we want to see if the issue is about racial stereotypes, if an Asian person then violates those racial stereotypes, are they seen as being a better leader than someone who fits a stereotype? And what we find is that when they violate the stereotype and they're really social, they're seen as being a great leader. But if they're Asian and they violate the stereotype and they're seen as being very dominant, because another stereotype about Asians is that they're not very assertive, and if they act very dominant, then people definitely do not want them as a leader. So we're framing that in terms of the history of Asians in the US, in terms of yellow peril. They're seen as being a good leader when they can have the supportive role, but they're not seen a good leader when they are in the top position.
Another question or comment?
Yeah, I guess for John and then, maybe for others, I've always been struck by, when that list gets listed with, chairs and directors and members of the EC and especially for the elected positions. So did you go back and look at how often people were nominated or stood for election versus how often they're elected? I mean, so I'm kind of, it'd be really interesting to have that pulled apart, right? To have a better sense of what kind of issue this is. Is it that people are less likely to vote for someone or that they're less likely to be nominated? Could be both, but I've always been curious about that relationship, if that's something that you all tracked and looked at.
Yeah, the part of the problem, of course, is that kind of information is extremely difficult to access. And so I do know I've been here since 1987. So and my institutional memory is that candidates for executive committee that were Asian were very far and few in between. And so and I don't know how many were initially considered, but at least after I got tenure, I started paying attention to these elections, and that was like 92 or so. There have been very few. I can think of maybe less than 5. So, anyways. But again, my memory could be fallible.
Should you talk about this last election in which their 50% were Asian?
Yeah. Very good. So actually, in the last set of elections, we did have Asian representative on the nominations committee, and we had a good number of Asian faculty members that ran for positions, and none of them got elected.
I wonder to what extent the persistence of the culture, which I've always viewed as a very good thing, that the culture from which the Asian Americans come is retained within the family, and we hear, whether it's a stereotype or not, about a taught hesitation to rise above and especially among women, to leadership or to stand out. I mean, that may be just my absorption of some sort of a stereotypical notion. But does this in any way discourage them, some retention of this culture, from applying for leadership positions and preferring perhaps to remain doing their own research and their own writing.
So I definitely think that culture could play a role, but we also need to look at the role of internalized racism. Because in the United States, there are certain messages about Asian women should be a certain way or should behave a certain way. And we should look at how these messages get into the minds of Asian women and they start to believe them themselves. Because when we say it's really about culture, which might be, but if you say it's 100% about culture, which I'm not saying you are, but if you say it's about culture, we're essentially blaming your Asian heritage, your Asian culture, which I think a lot of the issues in the US are about race.
As a young person in undergrad right now, I've always had a very strong interest in academia itself, but based on this panel, sometimes it's a little demoralizing to see. So I was just wondering, like, any words of advice?
Well, I always say, when you can't, don't wait for someone else to nominate you. Nominate yourself and you know, get your allies around you to speak for you, because I think that's an important way communities network and support each other. So if you're called to lead and you want to make a difference, nominate yourself and ask others for support.
For many years now, I have been actively mentoring, encouraging students to understand the how these systems work, and especially to understand the need for critical mass. Okay, that we need people in these positions, but in order for faculty to get into these positions of leadership, they have to become faculty first. In order to become faculty, they have to complete graduate school first. In order to complete graduate school, they have to finish their dissertations, et cetera, and so on down the line. But the payoff, if you will, is to eventually work into a position where you can be an agent of change. And actually, we are agents of change at every step along the way, because every advancement we make moves us into a newer and wider circle of potential voice and influence. But really, the critical point here is especially the juncture between junior and senior faculty, the juncture between untenured and tenured, that elevates faculty into a new realm of decision-making, power and influence. And the need for critical mass is simply that we need people to be in those rooms when the votes are taking place. Mm-hmm. So I would say, follow your passion for whatever you're interested in researching, whatever you're interested in pursuing, and keep in mind that critical mass, we are gradually making progress to get there.
My question is for Professor Kawada. I'm familiar with running in a general election and getting leaflets out before the absentee ballots go out, that sort of thing, and going door to door. What is there any analysis for the failure of Asian American candidates to make it to office, faculty senate or whatever? Has there been any analysis as to the shortcomings of what has occurred?
No, there hasn't. I can tell you that when we during the elections, we sent out to all our Asian faculty colleagues, let them know that there are candidates they might want to consider. And that's about as far as we've gone. We don't want to tell you to vote for them. I mean, you have to decide on whether on their own merits, whether they're somebody you might want to vote for. But that has been consistently done for the last 3 or 4 years now. But nevertheless, And I don't know whether that means that this kind of notice is falling on deaf ears amongst our Asian colleagues or not, but maybe it does. I don't know.
I was just wondering if it invites, interdepartmental dialogue among candidates to, foster the candidacy, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that we have now found it easier to get faculty, Asian faculty, to run for offices now that they see more and more examples of Asian faculties running, and so that's a good positive. We just now start to need to get them elected.
I think a step analysis is what I know some campuses are looking at as far as some of these issues around where does the pool become less diverse, step by step in the process, really taking a real granular and purposeful look at that might yield some information that's eluding us right now.
Back here in the back of the room. I know that in order to sort of change the climate of the university, it takes a long time. It's not something that happens overnight. But if this is to the entire panel, if you guys could suggest something that the university at a senior administrative level could do, tomorrow, next week, next month, to help sort of bust through that glass ceiling, what would you guys suggest as something that can be done in the short term to sort of help overcome these larger issues that will take time to create change?
Well, I would suggest one thing is to focus on the category of Asian American as a given. I think one of the insights which came out of the focus groups which we held was that Asian American faculty felt they weren't sure when they were counted and when they were not. And some sense of institutional consistency and clarity would be helpful, because when institutional practice is being implemented, if people who are appointed to chairships or directorships, if they don't know what the institutional message is, they are not going to implement practices in an inclusive way. So I think that kind of institutional consistency is very important for me in particular. And also in terms of the elections, I think that's true. I don't know enough about the EC elections, but many of the leadership positions are not elected, they're appointed positions. For example, the chairships, several of the other committees, and so that's a place where appointments can be made if there's an interest in taking Asian American faculty seriously. And then I think the last thing I would say is that one thing that worries me is that when it comes to Asian American faculty, I would caution against the cultural argument being too solidified, because it concerns me that if we're concerned about inclusion and equity and diversity, those have to do with institutional practices of inclusion and exclusion, and culture to me becomes an easy out, right? Because if we want to be inclusive, then everybody has culture. All communities have cultures. And so there's nothing, unless we're saying there's something essentially different or other about Asian Americans, which I would question, I think that's troubling to me. And so unpacking that stereotype would be very important to me.
And more transparency, which is nice.
Yeah, I'd like to say. I think one of the factors that contributes to the lack of clarity around the inclusion or exclusion of Asian Americans from conversations around diversity is the fact that diversity seems to be used often synonymously with underrepresented, and that elision of diversity and underrepresentation becomes a mechanism for saying Asian Americans are not underrepresented, therefore. So that exclusion accounts for the problem of Asian Americans being considered, in the words of a colleague several months ago, considered convenient diversity, that where we add color until it comes time to talk about dividing up resources.
I just wanted to ask, especially since we have that great question up on the PowerPoint, whether you guys are seeing any major differences between outcomes for Asian international and Asian American faculty, or between men and women in this group, or say between different kinds of Asian Americans, right? So any thoughts you might have on that?
Well, what comes to mind immediately is the need to disaggregate the data, the need to have disaggregated data, the need to have access to disaggregation in order to see what from a more nuanced picture of what's happening here.
Is there more, or shall I go on to another question?
Oh.
Reminded me to ask my question, which was about, and so if people have other reflections upon that call to disaggregate, and also to map against things like first generation, and I think I would love to hear more about that. But I do have a second question, which follows on, which wasn't as well formulated. But it follows on what Amy was just saying, which is as having fought in the humanities to call attention to the fact that Asian Americans often were underrepresented and, for example, should be allowed to have merit fellowships and in the graduate program and so forth. I did tend to think in terms of the kinds of issues of critical mass and so forth. And the sharp learning for me here, listening, is that having assumed that things were different in the divisions in which, in fact, because I looked at these numbers and worked with them to make my arguments, Asian Americans were not underrepresented, to discover that the glass ceiling is still there and that the numbers are not better, suggests that inclusion and diversity isn't a language. We have to start talking about prejudice and racism and, and I just would sort of like to hear more about, maybe in those specific terms within the natural sciences division, for example. Why aren't there more chairs? It's not a good question. Sorry, I was going to ask you. But it's truly shocking to me to discover that, having been over in my own division, I was assuming that things were different elsewhere. So more analysis, more statistics. Maybe you can comment. Someone should take the microphone.
Well, one thought that comes to my mind is, and of course there's no real kind of real data to support any of this, but of course a present chair is going to have an incredible influence of who the next chair is going to be. And if the present chair is white and is Caucasian, the next chair is most likely to be white and Caucasian. And so given that they're almost, with the difference being, exception being statistics, we don't have Asian chairs. I think that's a contributing factor. I don't think it's the only factor, but that's certainly a contributing factor.
This question is for Kim. Might there be some efforts at the national level, since there are only a small number of Asian American presidents, for them to come together to serve as mentors to perhaps CAOs and provosts who are aspiring to the presidency, and so that they are helping to pave the path?
There is the Apache Association, and also this publication that I mentioned earlier called together a group of Asian presidents to do just that. And some of them have talked about benefiting from that. And so we are engaged in a pipeline and Spectrum as well as some of the other programs. So that does currently exist.
I didn't want to lose the central theme of the discussion, but to complement it with another consideration, the closer that one gets to the presidency, the more the views of what constitutes effective leadership narrow. And the discouraging statistics that we've looked at are compounded by the fact that we have a view of what constitutes a leader that in no way would suggest that thoughtful, hardworking, intelligent, industrial, whatever stereotypes you want to offer there, would suggest that this person couldn't be effective in any position within higher education. So my central point here is that we not only need to examine the individuals who are being called to lead, but also our ideas about what constitutes leadership at every level within the academy.
I would agree, and a point that we focus on in our groups is the boards of trustees, who make the final leadership decisions in many of these presidencies. And so we have to do our work with them to help them unpack their own biases about who can lead, and what are they assuming about others that aren't like them, because still boards are overwhelmingly still white and male. So with our Moving the Needle initiative, we're focusing on boards of trustees as well. And with the Association of Governing Boards, we're asking them to partner with us in this effort.
Thank you. I'm short, so I know it's hard to see in this room. So I wanted to speak to one of the slides about the permanent foreigner. The idea that Asians retain their Asianness, whatever that means, forever, and therefore disqualified for leadership, I think is unfortunately still maybe around. And I think the idea of the step analysis, I have no idea about most of this data. And I certainly didn't know that so many people who were Asian or Asian American stood for election and no one won. I mean, that's clearly the step, and I'm depressed because I'm not sure what you can do about that, right? I mean, that's not something that's easy to remedy at all, because it speaks to a lack of desire on the campus to have Asians and Asian Americans in leadership roles. So that's depressing. I wish it were a different step, honestly. I mean, it'd be a little easier to manage, but I mean, it discourages people from wanting to run, actually, what you just said.
Every time you see your name, never got elected, next time you don't want to run. Absolutely.
I'm back here. I have a question about whether the panel can speak to the, what's interesting about the statistics that were posted about people at the very top of the leadership hierarchy. I think the assumption at the top of that hierarchy is that you need people who are very broad-minded, able to see things from a really broad perspective. And I think part of the model minority myth is that Asian Americans are specialists, or they're kind of very good at doing one thing really well. And maybe the part of the perception is that they're not able to see things from a broad perspective. So I guess one of the questions I have is like trying to change and reconsider how we think about what constitutes an effective leader. And because the qualities of an effective leader are based on the leaders that have existed before. So if we want to change that pool, we have to reconsider the criteria. I think that came up in somebody's remarks. But I'm curious if the panel can, or people in the room can speak.
Well, I know that being in conversations like this is how this gets traction, and having us expand these kinds of conversations is important. I know that you all know about the thedemands.org website. It has 77 institutions that uploaded their student demands across the nation. And part of all of and a theme in those demands is leadership, or lack of culturally competent leadership. And so this is the time to be in these spaces and these conversations about what does a culturally competent leader look like and bring to the table, and understanding. And so I think this is a prime opportunity to leverage this notion about good leadership, and how leadership has to be diverse and inclusive and transparent and all those good qualities, and it has to be diverse. And so we have the diversity, we have it, but we have to have the inclusivity. And so now I think this is a prime opportunity for us. At ACE, we joined with the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education to bring together campus leaders to talk about this. And so making sure that we can leverage that notion, what a good leader should be culturally competent. And if you're a leader, if you're a president and you're just now coming to the table around this, you're too late. And and that's the kind of thing we need to be thinking about when we bring new leaders on to our campuses. Anybody else?
Kim, thank you. I was particularly thankful that you mentioned this, the word conversation. And I actually wanted to direct it back to the LSA faculty about where is the conversation within the school. I know that you've mentioned some meetings, a letter to the board, a letter to the provost perhaps. and certainly this meeting is a step. But I'm wondering how the conversation is happening within the school, who's involved. You've also talked about some conversations within the Asian American population, but is that conversation outside of that community so that other groups can be aware of the issue, aware of how that's beginning to impact, and be able to, we talk a lot here on this campus about allies, about how to begin to create those kinds of coalitions and opportunities for others to join with you in both recognizing the problem, but also in terms of trying to address the issue.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to start the conversation, and we're trying to start by having the conversation amongst ourselves. And you know, faculty are busy, and all faculty are invested in their scholarship and in their teaching, et cetera. And if things are going well for you along those lines, then you're pretty much satisfied. And so the sort of issue then may only come to play when maybe 10 years from now you're senior and you're thinking, gee, I'd like to be chair, but you know, I keep being passed over, et cetera. And so we need to, as a group, I think, as a group of Asian and Asian American and Pacific Islander faculty, really get together. And I'm really hoping that this kind of a roundtable and the discussion the news will spread out and will really propel and give us some impetus to be able to form a group that can then have lively discussions and then formulate and maybe quote unquote make demands of the university. You know, we don't like to do that, but I think we need to start doing that.
Sorry.
Okay, this will be our final comment, and then we'll ask Rob Sellers to give us some thoughts.
Hi, I'm an undergraduate student here as well, and although I'm not in LSA, I see this like a problem throughout our larger university. And I guess I was wondering, just as an undergraduate student, like what are ways that in the past to have students get involved in this conversation, or what are ways that we can get involved? Are there things that students can do? So obviously we're not the ones doing the voting or the nominating, but I'm sure that there are like some ways that we can help, and just in ideas of like, I've seen in my life as well, like different Asian American faculty making a huge difference in my experience here, and wanting to have just some sort of voice at this level. So any kind of things you've seen in the past or things that you can see possible for students to be able to do.
Nominate your favorite professor for all kinds of awards because it raises the visibility and demonstrates that there are faculty who are valued by students for what they bring to the classroom.
Can I reply to? Students are incredibly powerful. I mean, we're here for the students. So if the students say they would like to have more Asian faculty in positions of leadership, that would be a great thing students could say.
That's right. Absolutely.
Can I just add really quick that there is a really interesting undergraduate group, Project Elephant, that I know some people in the room know and are familiar with. I just think they're super interesting. I think it's a great group. I'm certainly happy to connect you with them if you don't know them already. I mean, I don't know, but I think they're doing a lot of things right as an undergraduate student group. And any support and encouragement. Yeah, you are? Yeah. Well, then there you go.
Yeah. Oops. Okay, I did want to take advantage of Vice Provost Sellers' presence here to ask him to give some thoughts about next steps.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to thank Amy for the invitation and also thank the panel and thank you all for coming out today because I think the first and most important piece is, as John and others have talked about, is coming together and developing a network and first raising issues of consciousness and salience to the larger university community, and in particular the individuals who are making choices to know that there is actually an issue. Before I offer my comments, I think I need to contextualize them. First and foremost, I want to go on record and say very loud and clearly, it is not right. The second point I want to make is it is not the Asian and Asian American faculty's fault. But the third point is, in order for it to change, it is going to take the Asian and Asian American faculty and larger community to play a major role. And that's because, and it's no different from any other change that one would like to see, whether it's at this university or the larger societies, those who have been most disadvantaged are the ones that have to be in the forefront in making the change. And so I just have a few things that I want to say in that context. But again, recognizing my first 2 points, it ain't right, and it isn't the Asian American faculty and community's fault. The first step, I think, is really important, and again, this is, I think all of this is sort of rehashing what's already been said, is the development of a network of Asian American and Asian faculty, and along with the Chinese faculty group and figuring out how the groups will come together. But developing a formal network is really key in order to move along effective change. It's key in the sense that it provides a face and a focus and a group for which the larger administration and rest of the university can work with and be responsible to, as opposed to hundreds, if not thousands, of important but diffuse voices. Secondly, such a network can provide the kind of internal mentoring that is particularly important with regards to how faculty leadership actually happens at the university. That it's often a matter of hard-won knowledge about how the university works that has a lot to do with who is able to move up and who's not able to move up. And it's important that when that hard fought knowledge is gained by one in the community, that it is shared with others. And so I believe that's an important piece. The second thing with respect to that is that my office, along with Advance, has worked very hard over the last couple of years to have a number of faculty of color meeting opportunities. Most of them have been social, but some have focused specifically on mentoring with a particular focus with respect to assistant professors. The goal behind that is, one, to develop a sense of community across a lot of different communities, but to get people to know each other and to feel like they're not alone here at the University of Michigan. But the second goal is also to lay the seeds for opportunities for effective change and developing effective networks within and across communities so that that effective change could actually work. So I encourage us to continue to develop those both within our various communities and across our various communities. The second point that I want to make is a relatively concrete one. After developing such a network, develop a list of faculty, of Asian and Asian American faculty, who are interested in leadership. So I can tell you the first question that will come out, or the first response, if you go to, whether it's a department chair, a dean, a provost, or any other member who is developing, choosing people for leadership positions, or perhaps even more importantly, choosing people to serve on committees, is, who are the people? One of the things that I have learned being in the provost office is that there's an informal list. The list doesn't actually exist, but if you look at most of our committees, it's a relatively small group of folks that get asked over and over and over and over again to serve on various committees. And that's simply because oftentimes the issues that we're addressing are things that need to happen quickly, and you don't have time to ask folks who are going to say no. And you often ask the folks that you know at the top of your head and at the tip of the tongue, and that's clearly problematic. But by providing a list of folks who are interested in leadership positions and serving on larger committees that will ultimately lead to the opportunity for leadership committees, you can circumvent that process by having an actual list and saying, oh, okay, as I'm thinking about these 10 people, I got a list of 15 people here. I might not select all 10 people, but I'm going to select some of the folks that I know are going to be a yes. So that's an easy, straightforward piece. Another easy, straightforward piece as it relates to elections and standing for election in LSA in particular, but I think in general across the various college committees for which their individuals are elected. If you are together as a network, and if you're together as a community, one may actually vote together as a community. Those elections are extremely, is my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, poorly attended, poor participation. In fact, probably if a room of this size could sway a number of elections. So I'm now talking not as a university official, but as someone who over the years has seen how coming together as groups and as potential voting blocks can, again, represent your interests. So I see my colleagues out there in psychology. We won't say any more about that. The third point that I think is really important is also that there needs to be opportunity to develop leadership experiences. So one of the things that John Burkhart and I have been talking about is the NCID has over the years been partnering with ACE and HAKU and others to provide leadership training experiences. And we're investigating providing more of those experiences for faculty here at the University of Michigan, and in particular faculty with a demonstrated commitment towards diversity. Prop 2 statement. So I think that there's opportunities to also provide those kinds of experiences that will lead to and prepare folks for that next step. And then last but not least, the last thing that I want to say in a relatively concrete next step is also think about the diversity, equity, and inclusion planning process as a vehicle in which to address these concerns. So I am a little concerned that there's a sense that somehow the Asian American community is not seen with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I can tell you as someone who was very much involved and is very much involved in the strategic planning process, that is not the case. That when we have talked about, visualized, tried to develop the process itself, we explicitly thought of diversity in terms of a variety of different communities, not just race, not just underrepresented race, whatever that means, not just African Americans, but recognizing that understanding the way in which race, implicit bias, stereotypes, institutional racism, sexism, et cetera, play out, that it's a complicated, intersectional set of issues that play out that are different depending on where you are and what space you're in. Not just your communities, but again, those communities also intersect with a variety of different ideas. And so in order for us to ultimately be successful in what we're trying to do, it has to be a complicated process. And with that process in mind, the strategic plans that will ultimately be rolled out in late September and early October is not the end, it's the beginning. The planning process is the beginning. The plans themselves are the beginning. They are not stone tablets brought down by Moses with the 10 Commandments, and here we are in the Passover season. But instead, they're designed to be starting points, living documents, the beginning of a space for us to live up to our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and goals. So with that, I know that you've been standing or sitting around for a while and have gotten great food for thought and a great deal of knowledge here from our wonderful panel. I just want to thank you again for coming and thank you for listening, and to also say that in my position, I am somebody that is wants to work with you to address these issues, because if we don't address this issue in particular, then we've failed in our diversity, equity, and inclusion process. Thank you very much.
And please join me in thanking our panelists, and also thanking Vice Provost Sellers and Dean Andrew Martin, and also the National Center for our Institutional Diversity, Director John Burkhart, and Associate Director Marie Ting, who was a great help in the logistics of this event. So thank you all for a set of wonderful, provocative ideas and thoughts, and let's continue the conversation. Thank you.